Music of the Tygarts Valley Homesteaders. With the Great Depression, miners, timbermen, and industrial workers lost their source of income. Farmers were confronted with declining agricultural prices and 2 years of severe drought. There was a breakdown of the state's banking system and the culmination of years of environmental neglect. These all added to the obstacles faced by West Virginians and thwarted recovery from the Great Depression. The combined effect of these occurrences caused thousands of West Virginian families to be deprived of basic necessities of life and to suffer from malnutrition and starvation. In 1933, reporter Lorna Hickok, a friend of Eleanor Roosevelt, visited a coal camp in West Virginia known as Scott's Run. Hickok communicated with Eleanor Roosevelt that conditions were so dire in the area that she feared a breakdown in society. In 1933, Eleanor Roosevelt traveled to a place that became the national example of a disintegrating society. This visit would lead to some of the most important legislative changes in the history of the United States. Scott's Run, West Virginia was once known as the most valuable mineral deposit in the world, and eventually became known nationally as the poster child of the Great Depression. The once thriving coal mining area, Scott's Run, West Virginia, fell victim to the Great Depression, leaving thousands of families living in deplorable conditions. Unemployed miners were stranded in the mountains with no money to leave and barely enough to survive. Reporter Lorna Hickok stated, "Scott's Run, a coal mining community not far from Morgantown, was the worst place I'd ever seen. In a gutter along the main street through the town, there was stagnant, filthy water, which the inhabitants used for drinking, cooking, washing, and everything else imaginable. On the other side of the street were ramshackle houses, black with coal dust, which most Americans would not have considered fit for pigs. And in those houses, every night, children went to sleep hungry on piles of bug-infested rags spread out on the floor. There were rats in those houses." As I proceeded through the state, I found other places just as bad. Everywhere grimy, undernourished, desperate people, so hungry that they could not wait for the vegetables to mature in the pathetic little gardens they tried to raise on mountainsides so steep that they must have had to shoot the seeds into them to make them stick. They would dig up the tiny potatoes long before they had reached their full size and pick the tomatoes and eat them while they were still green. By April 1933, 63% of the town's population was unemployed. Many families lived in small shacks with little to eat and no running water. Several families would share an outdoor toilet. These living conditions made people vulnerable to disease. Children might go to school if they were healthy enough and not working to help out their families. I'll see you again when we got lots of time and tell you some more about this poor. In response to the crisis at Scott's Run, subsistence homesteads were developed. The Tygarts Valley Homestead was the second homestead developed by the Subsistence Homestead Division. So by October 1933, 8,692 people, which equaled 30.5% of the population of Randolph County, were on relief. Congressman Jennings Randolph successfully lobbied the Division of Subsistence Homesteads to establish a project in Randolph County. The Tygarts Valley Association was organized in 1934 to direct the project. One of the first responsibilities of the Board of Directors was to select the homesteaders, also known as colonists. The large number of applicants, 1,640, made this a very difficult task. The committee sought applicants who had agricultural experience, were intelligent, hardworking, congenial, and needed assistance. Ruth Bell, a local social worker who was on the selection committee, recalled that they believed they had selected the cream of the crop for the Tygarts Valley homesteads. To provide work for the homesteaders, the Resettlement Administration, a New Deal social agency, was created to alleviate poverty by providing employment in many areas, including the arts. This was conceived as a lifeline for the most impoverished and disenfranchised victims of the Great Depression. To further its goals of promoting solidarity, cooperation, and recovery among displaced farmers and workers, the agency had developed a recreational music program led by Charles Seeger. In keeping with the desires of Rexford Tugwell, one of the primary architects of the New Deal, the resettlement communities were intended in part to foster new cultural attitudes and patterns based on collective interest. This film, then, is about a social experiment. The rural rehabilitation and subsistence homestead programs were the New Deal's principal methods of addressing rural poverty. Rural rehabilitation focused on helping individual families regain their ability to sustain themselves and to develop a group identity based on good character and values. Theoretically, if the homesteads were successful, they would resolve one of the underlying causes of poverty in West Virginia. Bruno Nettle explained that music functions to create and represent identity. He said the influence of various kinds of relationships among groups of people, gender issues, power relations, interaction of socioeconomic classes, music in political movements, all perhaps relate to the matter of identity, whether it's national, ethnic, class, gender, or personal. The experiment was supposed to create well-educated, good citizens. And it was to heavily influence the construction of the group identity as the Tygarts Valley homesteaders. Their identity was based on socioeconomic class as the worthy poor, their place in the historical political movement known as the New Deal, and through the folk music that helped them through difficult situations, representing every aspect of their lives, from birth to death. Audience members attending musical venues in rural West Virginia in the late 1930s were often not aware that the government was not only sponsoring the musical acts, but also sponsored the concerts. The music played by the traveling folk musicians, often known as hillbilly groups, was enjoyed by many, but often not considered to be anything out of the ordinary. Many were unaware that the music was being recorded by music collector Gordon Barnes, who was hired by the Federal Music Project. His work would immortalize the sounds of those traveling hillbilly groups who played at the Trade Center and the Tygarts Valley Homestead School in Daly, West Virginia.
I used to go up there. They had cakewalks. You remember that?
Oh yeah, we had cakewalks all the time.
And they had these hillbilly shows that came in here from Clarksburg, Wheeling, and Fairmont.
Who did you say? Grandpa Jones?
Grandpa
Was here.
Oh, wow!
Well, it was considered a community. It said community and school.
Stoney Cooper, Wilma Lee.
Wilma Lee.
Wonderful things of folks are said when they have passed away. Roses adorn the narrow bed over the sleeping clay. Give me the roses while I live, trying to cheer me on.
I can remember my mother saying my great uncle Addison Boserman had a group, the Bosermans, and they played around here. Because she said did they have them on the radio? Did they have radio
They had a
shows?
stage up there.
Oh, at the
They were
school.
here in person.
There was a lot of bleachers along the side of the wall in there in the gym. And Mr. Snyder was my 6th grade teacher. And he catered to the boys playing basketball in there. The girls never got to play. We didn't have sports. The girls had to sit on the bleachers and watch the boys play, but we never got to participate in ball games or anything. It was just always the boys.
Yeah, they had dances here. Used to have groups come in like gospel groups that sung songs, you know. There was one called the Sunshine Boys.
Is this my mind made up? I'm going back to Jesus every day. Well, my heart is this my mind made up? I'm going back to Jesus every day.
Boys and a lot of groups like that had assembly programs and put on plays. You know, a class would put on a play. I don't think I was an actor, but I was generally in all the plays, you know. But yeah, we had a lot of fun, a lot of things like that happened.
I remember Mrs. Daniels when I was in 5th grade. We sang. We had the red songbooks.
Mary Daniels?
Yeah, Mary Daniels. And we sang, but she would take us at recess time in the gym, and she was teaching us how to square dance, and she taught us how to do the Virginia reel. And there seemed like there was always things going on.
We did have, when I was in 8th or 9th grade, we was allowed to dance on our lunch hour. But nobody got on that gymnasium floor if you didn't have tennis shoes or socks.
I don't remember.
I remember dancing. You had to. Well, it wasn't much dancing. The girls was here and the boys was here, and the girls danced with each other.
Yeah, you could go to the gym. Of course, when you went to the gymnasium, I saw it's going to take some work down there to get that up. When Mr. Donor was here as a principal, you couldn't walk in that gym unless you had tennis shoes on. You know, kids wear tennis shoes today now all day long. But then, you know, tennis shoes was just used for basketball and that kind of stuff. But if you didn't have tennis shoes, you went to the gym, you didn't get in there unless you took your shoes off. You went in your sock feet. And you'd have a jukebox there, and at noontime, you know, when it was bad and you couldn't go outside and play or do anything, you could go in the gym and dance, you know. And yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Oh yes, that jukebox was entertainment to be none compared. And we would always enjoy that after lunch and before school. And it seemed like this school was filled with music.
You always had a Christmas program every year, you know, and your parents come to watch that. And then we had a glee club. Arnold Weiss was our band director, and he also did the choir.
Right, or we set up the chairs, and he, you know, you set this row up, but then the next row behind it, you didn't put the chairs right. You had to offset them so that the people in the, you know, each row would be able to see. I mean, he taught us that. We marched out here. He taught us to march.
Well, that must have been great.
Left face, right face, about face.
You probably loved it in bed.
I did. Of course, he was military. He had been in the military.
I didn't know that.
And
It was great.
so, but right out here was where we practiced. And we'd come in the summer, and even in the summer, it gave us something to do because at least once a week we were here practicing.
Yes, we went to the Force Festival, right? You know, our band was big because we didn't have no football team, so we didn't have no coaches to harass the boys. You know, the boys come right along was in the band.
I remember we would have a Christmas program every year too, and sing, and our band would play, things like that.
So you had the band received.
Mm-hmm.
What grades did it go through then?
If I recall correctly, it was about 3rd grade, we would get these like recorders, you know, and start out with them. And I remember starting out with Miss Spurgeon. She was here then. Wow. And then you went from that to selecting what instrument you wanted to do the next year, and you could be in the band.
4-H was such a big part in Valley Bend, and I guess in Staley also, I'm not sure. Each community, Valley Bend had a community house, a community building. It was on the left side of the Methodist Church, but it was called the community building. And anybody, that's where we had our 4-H meetings. You could rent it out as a birthday party. The Methodist Church used it in the summer for Vacation Bible School.
Oh yes, yeah, the maypole dance was one of the favorites. It seemed like that was an activity that all the kids could do. Of course we took turns, but everybody was interested, everybody had a good time, and it was fun activity.
I don't know whether my first day was May Day or not. I know we came here in May. And of course on May Day they had a big whole school celebration in the gym. And they had the, I guess maybe volleyball post, and they had ribbons down. And the whole class had already practiced, and they did it by couples. A girl was with a boy, and they knew, they were winding in and out and doing the maypole dance.
You dressed up, you bought a real nice fancy dress, and had your hair all fixed. And they had this big pole in the gym, and they had strings up there, and you went in and out and raveled that around that pole. It was called the maypole dance, and it was done in May every year.
Have you heard of the May Day pole we had here? It was wonderful.
I think it was crepe paper that we used.
Yeah.
And when you got through, the pole was covered with crepe paper in all different colors.
It was a special time in life to be here. We were probably upper lower class and didn't know it, or lower middle class or whatever, but everybody was pretty much the same. We all came from the local houses here, There was no trailer park over here at that time, and there weren't a lot of trailers probably being made at that time, so it was mainly homestead houses that we all came from, and they were just little 5-room houses, but people kept them up.
The Tygart Valley Homestead is the newest and largest of the West Virginia homesteads. The Tygart Valley Homestead School, recently completed, is the crown jewel of the Tygart Valley Homestead.
Starting at 39 to 40 was the very first class.
Did you go to that one, Joe?
I went to the first one.
You went this year?
And I went to one after that. She was up there. And she came in here and dedicated the trade center.
Yeah.
She and Doris Stuke.
Wow.
And then they danced down at Beverly in the OIOF hall, because at one time the government had that rented for activities, and they danced down there.
Upstairs.
They had dances.
Wow.
Well, didn't they have dances upstairs here too?
I
Gabby Price danced with her one time. One of the CC boys that came here and stayed and married a Price girl.
Oh yeah.
Or a colored girl, rather.
Call it, yeah.
Well, I went to work at the mill in 1943.
During the war period.
And they had square dances up over the restaurant in this auditorium on Saturday, Friday and Saturday nights, and had church on Sunday.
Oh, they had church there too.
And they had church.
Yeah, we didn't have a church over here
Didn't
until
have
later.
any church around here.
Right.
Only over in East Staley.
Yeah, the Presbyterian over on the hill.
And
Yeah.
we had 2 Homestead women that started a church, Mrs. Rohr and Mrs. Gear.
Yeah.
And that was this one down here, was it not?
And
Just
then they had the one, opened this one up down here. I don't know who was, when they sold it.
that was the woodworking center prior to that.
Okay.
I don't even remember the preacher, I went there.
I can't remember either. I remember a lot of activities there and reunion.
Horn in 2016 maintained that during the 1930s, the United States government operated a variety of folk music collecting initiatives through New Deal agencies, ranging from academic archival projects to more utilitarian efforts of the Resettlement Administration, which they sponsored the field recordings of folk musicians in an attempt to boost morale and political awareness amongst displaced workers. Horn also maintained that the primary goal of the Resettlement Administration's federal music project was the creation of participatory music projects in each homestead. The residential music programs were run by professional musicians who were known as field representatives, who, as indicated earlier, after a 2-week training session at the RA headquarters in Washington, D.C., moved to the resettlement communities and organized music and dance events based on the residents' wants and needs. Often the most effective music projects involved the creation of music classes at local schools, teaching resident school children to sing folk songs and supplementing their regular curricula with music appreciation lessons. But the representatives' activities frequently included working in the church with their choirs and organizing community dances as well. New Deal programs were focused on overturning and overcoming poverty by training and employing unemployed workers. The Skills Division was created to train and employ artists and was the administration's most substantial venture, which involved the maintenance of a system of resettled communities where impoverished agriculture and industrial workers could be housed and equipped with new skills. Horn finally notes that the Resettlement Administration worked with nearly 200 such communities across the United States during its brief 2-year history, including 5 communities in southern Appalachia, initially established by earlier New Deal agencies.
Well, it would really be nice if it could be a center of the community again. When a community loses a school, sometimes it loses the heart of the community. And so it would be nice if that school could be a place where people could learn the same kind of, not the same exact skills, but the kind of skills that they would have learned in the original Homestead. You know, how to pull yourself up out of that economy and how to do better in life. Learn how to garden, learn how to find a trade, learn how to sew, or, you know, whatever it is that people want to learn, whether it's an artisan center or a tradesman center where people can take community-based classes. It would really be nice if there were a place for community members to go to and gather.
The association is a group that is desperately trying to maintain the original purpose of the building as a place to foster education, civility, and democracy by restoring it to its original luster and using it as a community center for all in the valley to enjoy.
There's a new day in view, there is gold in the blue, there is hope in the hearts of men. All the world's on the way to a sunnier day, for the road is open again. There's a note of repair, there's a song in the air, it's the music of busy men. Every plow in the land meets a happier hand, 'cause the road is open again. There's an eagle blue in the White House too, on the shoulder of our president there, with a lusty call telling one and all, brother, do your share. There's a new day in view, there is gold gold in the blue. There is hope in the hearts of men. From the plain to the hill, from the farm to the mill, all the road is open.
Let's give a cheer for Homestead Junior High. And it goes on from there. Shake down the thunder from the sky, whether the task be great or small. Homestead Junior High will win overall as our loyal team goes marching onward to victory. Rah, rah!
I just think that, the school's a very worthwhile thing to try to preserve for multitude of reasons, but historical's one, but community well-being.
But I would like to see it, become a community center, or, be for the community, that they could have things here again, plays or whatever they want to have. Like I said, there used to be singing groups, and the magicians used to come here and put on shows at night, and that kind of stuff. Of course, that's kind of out of the picture anymore too,
Did Harry Donor have a garden? It wasn't anything.
No, Harry Donor didn't have a garden. Harry Donor didn't even know how to use a hammer.
She could equate earlier years than I can with the principal.
Well, we give him the nails and the wood to put new steps in up there, and they never did put them in.
If Eleanor Roosevelt hadn't put that in there, this valley wouldn't be here. I mean, the valley would be here, but I mean...
Wouldn't be the way it is.
No.
I have a niece that lives in Memphis. Emma's 17. And so one day I got to thinking about all the changes. So I just sat down and I had 2.5 pages of printed out things, that was happened when I was little. And I sent it to her. And my daughter, she said, "Mom, that is a treasure." She said, "We read," she and her husband, and they have a son too, and she said, "We read over that," and she said, "We laughed our heads off because it was hilarious, some of the things that,
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think we had a better experience than most of the kids on the Homestead.